Ladies and gentlemen, the most important court case in the democratic history of South Africa is happening right now, and no one gives a shit about it. So that's why we will. And the most important court case, of course, is the DA's court case against the ANC because they wish to abolish Cadre deployment. So we've spoken about Cadre deployment on numerous occasions on this channel. We've spoken to Dr. Leon Schreiber, who's a member of parliament for the DA, who is spearheading the abolishment of Cadre deployment. And now it's all coming to a head in Johannesburg at the High Court, where the DA, the ANC, and AfriForum as amicus are trying to, sort out their issues concerning Cadre deployment. But Byron, I think it's important, before we even start what the court case is about, is what is the problem with Cadre deployment, right? Any democracy around the world, they've got their inner circle, they give those people powers to do various things the government does. How is it different in South Africa?
Yeah, because the reason in South Africa the way it's done is it's typically attached to some form of, let's call it BRAB. How else are we going to describe it apart from BRAB? This is usually catered deployments as a way to take a member of a political party and basically enrich them. Whereas as in places like the US or maybe even the UK, there is a degree of that going on where it's like party members go into positions, but there is still a degree of meritocracy. In South Africa, we have basically taken meritocracy and said meritocracy doesn't apply. All that really needs to happen is you have to have political affiliation. Now, the problem there comes in that the individuals get into positions that they have zero idea on how to do. So rather than them actually muddy their way through it and basically try learn the job or become better in the job, they don't do that at all. What they do is actually don't do the job full stop. They take the maximum amount of cash that they can extract, and then whatever portfolio or services that they're there to run basically gets turned into a giant shit show. And we've seen that up and down the country now. So that's really, in a nutshell, what the problem with catered deployment is.
Yeah, very much so. Like it's almost it's like the tentacles of the ANC going into every single leverage of power, right? In the
Mm.
state, and then BE is for the leverage of power in the private sector. That's what the ANC does, and it does it extremely well. And the results thereof is, well, we don't have electricity, water, the usual things a country should have for the most part. So
Mm.
the K deployment is ironically the reason why the ANC is losing power, and now the DA is trying to end it. Maybe that's a bad move. We should let it continue until 2024. But
Mm.
anyway, do you want to know what the ANC's arguments are concerning Cadre deployment?
Yes, of course. I'd love to hear it more. What does the ANC have to say about this?
Right, so the ANC says that basically the Cadre Deployment Committee only makes recommendations, and also Cadre deployment is a freedom of speech issue because now, according to them, the DA doesn't want any freedom of speech with regards to how the ANC, which position the ANC wants certain people to go into. So for the ANC, it's freedom of speech, and they're merely recommendations. The evidence suggests otherwise, though.
Yeah, so I mean, this is obviously the ANC's argument that by making these very polite recommendations, that they basically get to sit back and say, "This is who we would like, but it's down to you, and you do it on meritocracy." But everybody knows that that isn't really the way that it's done. So the ANC are basically trying to say that cater deployment may occur, but it's only a light touch recommendation. That is not what we see up and down the country. And that is certainly not what we saw during the state capture commissions. So what we actually see happening is that the ANC has an entire, should we call it a recruitment board, which Cyril himself used to actually chair. And during that, they would go through all the different high-level vacancies that were available and determine who they felt were the best individuals to deploy to those sectors. Now, let us not forget that during the State Capture Commission, Ramaphosa himself was asked whether cater deployment was a thing and whether it existed. And under oath, he said, no, it doesn't. So it's a thing. It's a thing of your imaginations. It's not there. So we obviously all saw that as being lie number one. Now, lie number two is that actually it does exist, but it's not as like aggressive as they pretend it to be. And that is not what we see in reality either. Now, you may recall during the state capture commissions, one of the fights the DA were trying to have is to actually get the minutes of cater deployment released to the public so we could see just how aggressive the appointment strategy of the ANC was. But the ANC was very loath to release the information for obvious reasons. When asked where the information was, again, the ANC, in typical fashion, said, "Oh, the minutes, they're not there. We never really took minutes. They were just like a rough outline, and we just chatted." And we all know that that's probably complete horseshit. Now, when asked And senior party executives have been asked, why did you do this? Their initial answer was, I suppose, understandable to a degree. And that was, when we took over power in 1994, all the levers of power were captured, if they want to call it that. It was held by National Party, NATS members, and those NATS members were never going to go with the new dispensation. So what they felt that we needed to do for the purpose of rainbow transformation in the country was to basically replace NAT aligned individuals with new regime aligned individuals. And whilst you may understand that and go, okay, I understand why you may have that as a rationale, you would still need a degree of meritocracy to apply. But meritocracy has never applied with the ANC, because the problem with the meritocracy is it takes a number of years to develop. As Leon described with you, Ramon, it takes a number of years to develop. These years of development have not been there for the ANC. And because they have not been there, there are no suitable candidates for these roles. So the natural job would be create somebody to go through the process, then employ them. The ANC hasn't done that. It's basically just gone, who's going to side with us? Appoint that guy. And then the inevitable outcome occurs.
Yeah, I mean the problem, Byron, I think you think too much like a white person. With due respect, this was never about fulfilling the ANC's mandate. This was all about the grift.
I didn't say it was. I said that's what they
No,
claimed.
I know, but no one actually no one believes them for the most part. The cadre deployment is a pure grift, a pure grift to keep the lubrication system and the patriot network of the ANC rolling forever. And hey, if they're able to snag a few constitutional court judges, maybe the CEOs of different SOEs and things like that, hey, the grift is actually very lucrative, and they can't get into trouble for it because the courts will rule in their favor because they have been deployed by the ANC. But I think it's important just to say what Mark Oppenheimer, who is the advocate for AfriForum, he describes it really, really well, where he talks about the fact that the aim of cadre deployment is to whisper in the government's ear and say, pick this person. But when you come to ANC meetings wearing your ANC hat and you didn't listen to the recommendations, there will be consequences for you, which has happened within the ANC itself. If they deploy you to somewhere and you don't actually do your job, you're out, my friend. And we well know the midnight cabinet reshuffles from Jacob Zuma. This is an element of it. And Mark goes on to say that both the government and ANC parties are parties to an unlawful practice. The government is akin to a thief for hire, and the ANC is akin to the criminal network ordering the theft, and it is the South African public which is being stolen from. So the entire grift of the ANC depends on cadre deployment. If you nip that in the bud, believe me, salaries won't be paid at Latuti House for the next 20 years.
Yeah, but let's not forget that the ANC motto that we've heard many times, they didn't join the struggle to become poor, right? The problem
Yep.
is they also didn't join the struggle to become educated and to actually develop a business. So the problem is, like, these guys obviously haven't gone to university. They'd say, oh, that's because we are fighting in the struggle. Most of the time they're overseas getting pissed on a daily basis as opposed to fighting any struggles. But
Yep.
don't let that inconvenient fact hit you in the face. But the reality is a lot of these guys were sat there and now they want to be beneficiaries of the new dispensation, but they don't have any skills to be able to develop anything. So it's not like they can go create a factory. And we've seen many, many BEE tenders where they actually get the money to create the factory, then create nothing apart from a new house and a garden party. So the reality of the situation is, how are they going to become rich? Well, there's only one option, and that's to take state money and self-empower themselves through the coffers of the state. Problem is, the state itself, as anybody who's got a brain cell recognizes, the state doesn't generate money. The state collects money from its citizens who generate or create the money.
Extracts money.
Correct. And the problem is, in this instance, what is the money that the state is extracting? Well, it's your money. It's your taxes. It's your development money. It's your business. It's your corporation tax. It's your PAYE. It's your VAT. All those things are now going into that ANC cadre's pockets so that he can self-enrich. And that's why obviously it's been a theft of the individual.
Yeah, which leaves us with, huge government debt, load shedding, all sorts of shit. So anyway, do we want the DA to win this case? Because I'm not too sure. Like, on one hand, cadre deployment is the reason the ANC is failing so dismally at sort of service delivery, and that's why it won't win 2024. On the other hand, if cadre deployment is found to be illegal, the entire edifice of ANC ideology sort of crumbles. So, which way are you going?
Well, there's a third option which you haven't even considered, which is what happens if the DA do come in 2024 and they've just outlaid cadre deployment. How's the DA get its people in power? Right? I mean, you're assuming that your guys are going to obviously just completely wipe the board with all the existing cadres that are there. So I don't know, man. It's a tough one. I think now that the status rot, the only real option that we have is to basically reduce the state. Do you know in World War II, real stat, World War II, the actual state only accounted for 5% of GWP, gross domestic product. Right?
Yeah.
It's actually crazy. In a modern time, like in South Africa, the actual state spending accounts for over 55%. Like, check the growth. I mean, the growth rate. And people in World War II were complaining. I mean, that was a bloody World War time where you actually had to cajole all the levers of the state to fight a foreign invasion. And that was still only 5% of the economy was dedicated to it. Modern times, it's like 55%. Come on, man. The only option now is the state's too big, the state's too toxic, the state just needs to go. And maybe we need to reduce it back to that 5%.